Many thanks to Mr. Kyriakidis. And now fast moving to the Zeno of Citium address. Zeno of Citium, Zenon Okidiefs in Greek, was a Hellenistic philosopher from Citium, now Larnaca. And as many might not know, Larnaca is the only city in Cyprus and perhaps one of the few globally never abandoned by its residents. It has been constantly living as a community for thousands of years. Zeno now was the founder of the Stoic school of philosophy, which he taught in Athens from about 300 BC. Based on the moral ideas of the Cynics, Stoicism laid great emphasis on goodness and peace of mind that is gained from living a life of virtue in accordance with nature, a very topical issue, if I may say so myself. It proved stunningly popular at the time and flourished as one of the major schools of philosophy from the Hellenistic period right through to the Roman era. It further enjoyed revivals during the Renaissance as Neo-Stoicism and in the current era as Modern Stoicism. As a purely Cypriot world-known personality and relevant to the mission of the Cyprus Forum, it has given its name to the main address of this forum. This year's Zeno of Citium address will be given by Věra, Jourová, Vice President of the European Commission for Values and Transparency, and we will hear from her now.
Ladies and gentlemen, many thanks for the invitation to deliver a speech in the Cyprus Forum. I am delighted to share some considerations with you on a number of topics of high importance for our democracies. Starting with anti-corruption efforts. In May this year, the Commission adopted a package of measures to fight corruption in the EU and globally. The package includes a legislative proposal to update and strengthen the legal framework to combat and prevent corruption. The proposed directive modernizes the existing EU anti-corruption legal framework by including all corruption offences and sanctions in one single legal act, covering both the public and private sector. Second, harmonizing the definitions of criminal offences in line with international standards and harmonizing and increasing the level of criminal sanctions across the EU. Third, ensuring effective investigations and prosecution of corruption by national law enforcement authorities, as well as efficient cooperation procedures between all actors involved. On the prevention side, the goal is to build a culture of integrity by raising awareness of corruption through information campaigns, research, and education programs. Ensuring that the public sector is held accountable, demanding member states to adopt mechanisms for the open access to information, for the disclosure and management of conflicts of interests in the public sector, including the declaration and verification of assets of public officials, and the regulation of the interaction between the private and the public sector. Also, by setting up specialized anti-corruption bodies and ensuring adequate resources and training for authorities and agents responsible for preventing and fighting corruption. We very much welcome the progress made by Cyprus in the fight against corruption. The establishment of the Independent Anti-Corruption Authority has shown political commitment towards the protection of the rule of law. It is now essential that the Anti-Corruption Authority becomes fully operational and has the necessary political and financial independence with the adequate technical and human resources allocated to carry out its functions effectively and soundly as to gain the trust of the civil servants and the population of Cyprus. But beyond the prevention and repression of criminal activity such as corruption, citizens can only keep faith in democratic institutions, including in the EU, if the principles of ethics and integrity are upheld by those institutions and their members. This is why the Commission adopted in June a proposal for the creation of an interinstitutional ethics body, as announced at the beginning of the mandate by President von der Leyen. With the establishment of the ethics body, there will be, for the first time, common standards for ethical conduct of members of all institutions. EU politicians will be subject to common, clear, transparent and comprehensible ethical rules. The interinstitutional body will develop ethical standards which all institutions commit to respect and implement in their internal ethics rules for their members. The body will focus on tasks with added value and does not duplicate existing structures such as the EU investigative structures, be it European Public Prosecutor's Office, European Anti-Fraud Office and European Ombudsman. The European institutions must now work together to make the body a reality in the coming months. Negotiations are ongoing, and we are convinced that all institutions are willing to reach an agreement as soon as possible. I am also glad that Cyprus is such a firm supporter of the goals we want to achieve with the European Media Freedom Act. Cyprus has been a very constructive participant in the debates that took place in the Council, and I would like to thank the Cypriot government and everyone involved in forming its position for it. A very important aspect in that context is to strengthen the transparency of media ownership. Only if citizens know with certainty who owns and is behind the media, they can identify and understand potential conflicts of interest. This is a prerequisite for forming well-informed opinions and, consequently, to actively participate in a democracy. That is why we have introduced an obligation into the proposal for media service providers to make easily and directly accessible to their recipients their direct, indirect, and beneficial owners. Equally important is to ensure that the public knows about state expenditures for advertising in media, since it can have similar effects as if the state owned the media in question. Against this background, I hope for a swift entry into force of the Media Freedom Act, but also for the emergence of a climate in society that demands media ownership and state advertising information, and that these demands are fully met. And I will finish with our more important founding value, the rule of law on which the EU is based. Respect for this value guarantees the protection of all other values, including democracy and fundamental rights. The Russian military aggression against Ukraine is a stark reminder of why, more than ever, it is important to fight to protect the values upon which the European Union is built. The Commission is monitoring developments concerning the rule of law in Cyprus in the context of the annual Rule of Law report. The fourth edition was adopted in July and included country-specific recommendations to all member states, aiming to further assist them in their efforts to take forward ongoing reforms and help them identify where improvements are needed. It's very important that Cyprus completes all the necessary reforms in terms of judicial independence and efficiency, the fight against corruption, freedom of the media, and checks and balances, and of implementing them in practice. As regards the justice system, the Commission recognizes Cyprus' efforts to reform its justice system. The 2023 report indicated the lack of a clearer distinction between the advisory and prosecutorially role of the Law Office as a matter of concern. This was reflected in the recommendation to Cyprus to strengthen the independence and the accountability of the prosecution service, taking into account European standards on independence and autonomy of the prosecution. When it comes to combating corruption, we welcomed the fact that the legislative framework on lobbying continues to improve, and a parliamentary committee monitors conflicts of interest for members of parliament. At the same time, the assessment highlighted the importance of introducing rules on asset disclosure for elected officials, combined with effective, regular and full verifications with a view to increasing transparency and accountability. A corresponding recommendation was made to Cyprus in this respect. In the area of media pluralism and media freedom, we look at the protection of the right to access to information, transparency of media ownership, and fair and transparent distribution of advertising expenditure by the state and state-owned companies. The Commission recognizes the efforts to strengthen transparency of media ownership for broadcast media. These efforts need to be extended to digital and print media. In addition, the adoption of legislation in the field of state advertising will ensure fair and transparent distribution of advertising expenditure by the state and state-owned companies. In the area of access to information, the Commission welcomes the law on access to public sector information and encourages Cyprus to overcome the difficulties in interpreting and applying the legal exceptions to access. Many thanks for your attention.